Instructional Design. I'm Whitney Kilgore, the co-founder and CAO at iDesign. I'm joined by the one and only Dan Avida. He's a serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and is most well known in the online higher education space from his time as co-founder of Coursera, which he started with his wife, Daphne Kohler. And now the dynamic duo are doing something really new and super special. Dan, I understand that the experience of your daughters going to school online using Zoom during the pandemic kind of led you to create Engageli, which is this fantastic new tool in the marketplace. As a pandemic parent, too, I can really appreciate the experience of watching children Zoom out, or in our case, suffer from WebEx fatigue, if that's a thing. Can you tell us how Engageli is different from other synchronous platforms and how it promotes engagement and active learning?
First of all, thank you very much for the very kind words. And like you said, we definitely started the company based on the observation we had of watching two girls walk around with a Mac in their hands in the living room, watching Netflix and playing video games, while I could hear in the background chit chat from the classroom. And they very quickly turned off the camera, turned off the mic, and they set up an early warning system with their buddies. So if they got cold called, they basically turned on the camera, turned on the mic, responded, and went back to doing what they were doing, which had nothing to do with schoolwork. So at Engageli from day zero, and that's why the company is called Engageli, we were very focused on making online learning engaging. And we do it in a number of different ways. First of all, we believe learning has to be collaborative and social. So all the students in Engagely sit around the table. And by the way, the term table was coined by my daughter, who, when I described our active learning pod, and I explained what the active learning pod we're building is, she said, "Oh, it's like a table in school." So she's right; it is like a table at school. And same like at a table at school, and the girls, well, our oldest is now a college student, but at the time she was still at high school. All the kids are sitting around tables, collaborating all the time. The motto of their school is learning by doing. And so the tables at Engagely are designed in a way where students, if the instructor permits it, and instructors can turn off that mode if they choose to, are able to converse with each other while the instructor is presenting. Now, some instructors are discomfited by that because, oh, I'm here dispensing pearls of wisdom. What are the students doing chatting with each other? The thing is, when you look at what people are actually doing in our sessions, the shy students are much more comfortable asking their friends what's going on than asking the instructor. And so there's this notion of really no student gets left behind because students are very comfortable asking their peers what's going on. And by the way, if they around the table see that nobody else understands what's going on, then there will be a brave student. They'll raise their hand and ask the instructor to clarify what's going on. And as I'm sure you know better than I do, Whitney, that the more students are kept abreast of the material, the better learning outcome. And this is one of the ways we do it. The second way we foster engagement is by a feature we have, which are embeddable tags in the materials that the instructor is producing. So as opposed to other systems which require the instructor to go out of the way to learn a new authoring system, they don't have to use any authoring system. They can use anything that they're using anyway, like PowerPoint or like Keynote or like Google Slides. And we give them tags to embed in their materials, which by the time we beam it over to the students, we transform these tags into interactive objects on the student screen. So that's the second thing. The third thing is to close the feedback loop. Daphne has this term to gauge the temperature of the class. It's very, very, very hard to do, especially with all online with Zoom or with WebEx, like in the case of your kids, because students immediately turn off the camera and turn off the mic, and you have no way to know what's going on. And so we basically catch all the things that the students are doing. Are they sending chat messages to each other? Are they taking notes? Our system facilitates note taking, and students love that feature. Are they responding to these polls, to these quiz questions? Another thing we allow the instructor to do is distribute documents for shared documents for people at the table to collaborate on? Are they working on it? And so we give the instructor this data, both in real time as well as after the fact. And we also have various feedback, bidirectional feedback mechanisms between the students and the instructors. So the students can give thumbs up, thumbs down that only the instructor can see who gave what. But students get a general sentiment. And we also have full anonymous feedback from students to instructors, which gives people the ability to speak their mind. And if the instructor is getting a lot of negative feedback from the students, they should probably change what they're doing.
That is incredible. And Dan, I have to say, ability to speak one's mind. If anybody has followed the feedback that I've had to say about edtech platforms over the years, they know I don't usually get really excited about technologies as much as I get excited about the affordances of those technologies. And having had the opportunity to use Engageli for both an EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative or ELI session and for a session on active learning during the Empirical Educator Project, I find the ability to choose a table you're going to sit at and talk to your peers and colleagues really powerful, but also the seamless or frictionless transfer into what can be group work, because there's not this clunky movement to breakout rooms and things like that. And so, I think those other platforms we talked about earlier were designed for business. And Engagely is really different because you're designed for education by educators. And I don't know if you want to say just a little bit about that.
Our founding team basically does consist of two former Stanford professors, Daphne and Serge. Between them, they taught at Stanford for almost 50 years. Both actually had very high ratings as instructor. Daphne got a teaching award at Stanford. And actually, the reason why Coursera started was because she started experimenting back in the 90s on better ways to teach in person Stanford students. And then one of our colleagues, and then turned out a couple of our colleagues, looked at that, said, "Oh, why don't we use these techniques to see if we can teach the world at large?" And from that, actually, two companies started. One was Coursera, the other is what today is called Udacity. But they were seeing basically the type of work that Daphne was doing, focused on in basically focused in on the tuition-paying Stanford students. And as you know, today Coursera is teaching well over 70 million people. But a lot of the product was designed by Serge, by comments from Daphne, as well as by the voice of hundreds of instructors we've been talking to. I started demonstrating what we were doing back in October of 2020. And as you well know from working in this space for years with me, professors are very open with their feedback and constructive criticism. And so we've been getting a lot of ideas. So, for example, the panel feature, that's something that came from a number of business professors. The ability for two people like you and Adrina have done several times to co-host a session, that's from another set of professors. The fact that we have multiple different tags now and we're deploying more. A lot of this is feedback from hundreds of instructors. And I know that some of the people who consider themselves our competitors are not really, are, for example, whining about the fact that we allow students, if the instructor permits, talk during the class. In fact, some of the first instructors to use Engagely actually want us to amp up that feature because they saw the pedagogical benefits of students not being left behind. Or another thing that one of or some of our instructors actually picked up on is in this whole thing of no student gets left behind. Let's say you have a dyslexic student, or let's say you have a student whose native language is not English. You can put at a table a facilitator for the dyslexic student or a translator that will help that student or a group of students stay abreast of the class materials. And that doesn't interfere with anybody else because they're all hearing at the table what the instructor is saying. And if somebody has a question, oh, I didn't understand that term, the translator can translate into their native language and they can continue progressing in the class. Um, so many of these, and you're 100% right, Whitney. I mean, candidly, in the early days of the company, when we understood that the world needs this product, we thought, hey, it's a big hassle to build our own video conferencing platform and then tune it for instructional design. So why don't we take a look at what's out there, Zoom and others? And we read carefully all their APIs and realized that you simply cannot make a good, like you said, they were built for business purposes, and they were built, and in a business setting, people better be engaged. I mean, if you're in a conference call with three of your colleagues, you're assuming that all three are paying attention. Otherwise, they probably will not remain employees of iDesign for much longer. But in our case, yeah, I mean, you got to make it interesting for the students. And so we realized you simply have to build a platform from scratch. We hired some of the best engineers on the planet to build this platform. And very interestingly, we obviously eat our own dog food. So in our board meetings, we use Engageli, and some of our board members have switched over to using Engageli because some of the features we designed for instruction, like when you raise your hand, there's this orderly queue of people that appears on top of the screen. That's actually good for a business setting, also, Whitney. You don't have this thing where I don't know if I'm supposed to go next, and so let me start talking, and then I'm talking over somebody else. In Engage, it's really interesting to see that people literally politely wait their turn, even if they're Israelis.
Your focus at Engageli, to your point earlier, on inclusivity and accessibility has been really intentional. And you shared a little bit about how you might be able to support English as a second language learners or a student with a disability. But can you also talk about the low bandwidth, maybe even marginalized populations, how you're thinking about that in the design of the platform itself, just to help democratize education, make it more accessible?
Serge, before he was an educator, before he did his PhD at MIT, served for 5 years in the communication corps of the Israeli military. Other founders of the company, Daphne, my brother Gidon, me, we all served in basically military intelligence. So we're communication people at heart. We've been doing, just like, by the way, your husband, we've been doing communication for way too many years. If I would say the number of years we're doing it, Daphne will slap me as she should on the side of the head. And so we were thinking, what do we need to do to make it work anywhere? And we know that video is very time consuming. By the way, it's important to note that one of the companies I built is a company by the name of Electronics for Imaging. So we know all about image compression, decompression, and we put a lot of work to make the system be very thrifty in its need, not just for bandwidth, but also for compute power. And the way we do it is as follows. First of all, we do not ship all the audio video to everybody. And so what happens in Zoom, if you have 50 people, Zoom automatically will ship the audio video streams from all 50 to all 50. So you have an n squared problem. You have 50 squared video streams going everywhere. And that's why Zoom, I'm sure you've seen this, Whitney. They tell you if you have more than 20 people, shut down the cameras. In Engageli, you can have 700 people. You can leave the cameras on, the audio on. We actually encourage it. And the reason is because each table only is seen and heard by other table mates. And unless you raise your hand, your audio and video are only going to other table mates. So you don't have the n squared problem. Another thing we do is our gallery view. We do what we call prepackaging. So in the cloud, we assemble a screen that would be Whitney and Andrina and Tim and everybody else. And we compress that very efficiently. And then we ship that. So, from the student's perspective, when you ship one aggregated video stream, it's way less compute intensive as well as video intensive. The other thing we do is we have a lot of graceful degradation that we've built into the product. So let's say somebody's on a cellular connection or somebody's in Africa. We basically start shutting down the less important video streams. So the most important when you're learning is to see what the instructor is showing you. And so that one we always keep. But maybe it's not that important to see your table mates if you really don't have enough bandwidth, or maybe it's not that important to see the instructor. So we gracefully shut down these things. And the proof is that people are using us. For example, we have a partner in Europe, ESMT, one of the top business schools in Europe, that for basically social reasons decided to provide business classes to African mathematicians when these mathematicians are present in the continent in Africa. It worked flawlessly, not a problem. We have people using us in the Philippines. Works without a problem. So it's not just theoretically we've done all that. Practically, the system does work in these challenging conditions. As I mean, you've seen me do demos, Whitney, and you know that I have my friend Alama as my student. The Lama is using a 12-year-old laptop.
And that tells the tale, doesn't it? That llama is able to engage in the class too. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time and the story today. In full disclosure, just for anybody who might be listening who's curious why Dan mentioned my husband, when I saw the platform in October of 2020, I got so excited about it that I introduced my husband to Dan, and he now works at Engageli as well. But Dan, before we wrap up, if people want more information about Engageli, how do they find out what the next steps are to kick the tires on the platform and become part of this new movement in education?
So we have a website, obviously, Engageli.com. Very shortly, people will be able to just start teaching. For now, we think that it's better if they spend a little of time getting a little bit of training. So they should just on the website book a demo and go from there. Yeah, and then by the way, my email is very simple. It's dan@engagely.com. It wasn't a brilliant choice because I get endless amounts of spam offering me all kinds of services I'm not interested in. But anybody who's watching this and wants to learn more, just please send an email to dan@engagely.com. And thank you very, very much for everything, Whitney.
Thank you, Dan.